Welcome to another Testing Peers podcast. We've got a couple of new faces, which is quite exciting. But my name's Chris Armstrong, joined as ever by David Maynard.
Hello.
By Steve Watson.
Hello.
And our first ever American, Tara Walton.
Hello. Don't hold it against me, though, okay?
Today we are going to be talking about what do testers do, and specifically to an audience that maybe don't really understand. But before we dive into that, we are delighted that Saffron QA continue to sponsor the podcast. Saffron QA is a specialist in testing recruitment, offering permanent contracts and a newly developed retained recruitment service. More details can be found in the show notes, or please reach out to Ben directly to find out more. Now, as is our wont, Tara, have you got us an exciting bit of banter?
Oh, well, I am very curious to find out what kind of board games you guys play in your free time.
What's free time?
What's free time? You know, the things you do while you wait for the test to run.
The last board game that I played was at my in-laws' house with my two kids and my mother-in-law. We played an old game called Payday. Now, has anyone here played Payday?
No.
I've never even heard of it.
No, I've not heard of it.
There's a calendar, and you move through the calendar, and not only do you have the opportunity to get paid at the end of the month, but you also collect bills, and you can also invest in things and sell them as you go through, which is exactly like real life, right?
It doesn't sound like much of a
fun.
game.
No, it's a game. You roll the dice, and there's cards and stuff. It was all right. My son likes it until he thinks he's going to lose, and then he leaves.
Fair enough.
The solid methodology.
For me, I like the classics like Cluedo, and the kids like Monopoly, although sometimes Monopoly can take a little bit long. But the last game I played is a game called Blockers, which consists of a square with lots of different sized irregular pieces, and every person has the same set of irregular pieces, and you have to create the longest chain, and it's the person that has the least number at the end that is the winner, and you can only connect them via the corner of a previous one, and other people are sort of moving in from the corners in a sort of pincer movement.
It's a bit like Blockbuster, but with pieces on a board.
But they're not all hexagonal. They're just sort of square.
Oh,
just little cubes.
That's where it fell down.
Yeah. So it's a square basically, and there's lots of little squares which you then try and block your other people in the game. It's quite good fun.
Sounds good. For me, the one I go back to is always around Christmas time. We get the Monopoly board out and we play for a few hours, and then we do that for a few days, and then it goes away for another year. But we've got the traditional one, but there's also sort of the here and now version. But I always kind of get confused with the money amounts because I've played the original one so much. I kind of know those, and the other one confuses me.
I'm not allowed to play Monopoly anymore. Apparently, side deals are not allowed.
Surely anything goes in Monopoly. It's like a bit like real life.
That's what I said.
My mum used to open up the bank, and she'd borrow as much money as she needed.
But apparently it's cheating. I travel around with these little gum pack games. They're about the size of like an old pack of gum. But the one I've been playing lately is called Hue. It's Hue, and you have to, kind of like dominoes, connect the colors, and the person who at the end of the game picks their color gets however many points are connected. It's really fun. So you don't even know as you're playing. There's no strategy. It's kind of the last move wins.
Wow, that's good.
Sounds fun to look that up.
We'll include links in the show notes to all these games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you've got any links that we go, just chuck them our way. Yeah, we like more games. Thanks for that, Tara. I think we've got to know each other well enough to maybe talk about what testing is. Steve, you got to kick us off?
Yeah, we thought we'd do a fun thing about trying to explain what the heck it is we do to people who are not testers. We started off thinking about, do we actually know what we do ourselves? But maybe that's not the best thing to start with, because if you don't know what you're doing, how can you explain to someone else? Tara, how do you explain to somebody when they say to you, so what is it that you do exactly?
So it depends on the audience that I'm talking to, but if I'm talking to somebody that's completely non-technical, like my parents or anybody who can like barely function with email, I like to tell them, when the bank website messes up, I look for those problems. And they kind of seem to go, oh, I see that all the time. You're not doing a very good job.
That's a good way of explaining it, though, isn't it? I like that.
It's very accessible for certain things that people understand, right? If there's something that's quite tangible, they can see it. Like I started off in computer games and people know what a bug in a computer game is. People know when there's like a data breach and it goes in the news. They know what those things are. They understand them. And so then they just think it's just broken stuff. That's your job.
Because we're a product development company as well as software, I have to add in the bit where phones go wrong or some other things. Yeah, so we might be looking at embedded software as well as the sort of hardware. Funnily enough, I didn't know that this topic was going to come up, but a couple of days ago, I did actually ask my own daughter, who's 19, did she know what I actually did? And she was able to give me an answer, good description of what she thought, because she's asked before. But lots of people don't actually know what their parents actually do, especially if they're not traditional jobs. I'm quite proud that my daughter does actually know what I do.
She's paid attention, which is good, because
Yeah.
most kids don't really care, do they?
And listened for a change to a dad, which is...
Well,
which is
Attention
great.
to detail is important
Absolutely.
for being a tester as well.
It is.
You're raising her to be a tester.
I don't think her passion is in testing, no. Unfortunately not.
Got me thinking, actually, as you were talking there, and I was reading something earlier on about ChatGPT, and I was thinking, I wonder if anybody's actually gone on there and asked it to describe what the job of a tester is and what that would come up with. I'm then going to have to go and do that at some point. It'd be quite interesting to see.
I've actually got it up here now. Shall I type it in live?
Oh, go for it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yes.
Yeah, nice.
GPT,
Look at that.
everybody.
We'll see if it's accurate.
Do we need to do a drum roll while we're waiting?
What's the actual question I'm asking?
Or what do software testers do?
What do software testers
Yeah. Well, that could be interesting.
Okay.
Well, of course, there's
so-
always the conversation of like, well, which title do you put in there?
Yeah.
The 8 million things that you can call a software tester. I'm sure you get a different answer for everyone.
Every time.
That could be your next topic. What should we call ourselves? Are we testers? Are we quality QA engineers? Are we quality engineers?
With working in a consultancy, you have a title, but also then when you're with the client, you have a different title. And then people say, what is your title? And you're like, yeah, tester.
We always just revert to
Or
tester.
it's some elaborate title. And they're like, what does that mean? Software tester.
Yeah.
We've gone through an episode before about titles. We perhaps don't go there.
Well, David, do you know?
ChatGPT has come up with an answer. I'll sort of summarize it. So there's a paragraph to begin with. So software testers are responsible for ensuring that software applications or products are functioning as intended and meeting the needs of the end users. Some of the key responsibilities of software testers include, and I'll just do the initial titles of this. So they're designing and developing test cases, identifying defects, collaborating with developers, analyzing test results, providing feedback to stakeholders, and ensuring compliance. And it finishes off by saying, overall, software testers play a critical role in ensuring the quality of software products and helping to deliver a better user experience.
I like the bit about the critical role. That's good.
Yeah.
That's
Ooh.
pretty good. I accept this. Better than some of the actual job descriptions.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're feeling important right now. This is good. More.
It didn't say the words, they are the gatekeeper of quality.
No.
That's good.
Or
That is
there
good.
was no bottleneck, no gatekeeping. I like this.
No.
They don't own the quality either. I like that bit.
Um,
Yeah. So did we just point to that from now on then? Is that the end of our talk when anybody says, what do you do? You go, yeah, just go and read that over there.
I gave a presentation about it for my project recently, and I said one of the key things that you'll find testers are going to be doing is uncovering information about the product with that context, painting a picture to ensure that we have a level of confidence that is relevant. That's sort of the way I painted that. But as I like to say, it's always about the context, because you could be doing all this lovely stuff over here and it isn't relevant to the end user. So, yeah.
I had a product owner once that had joined our team late and had everybody go around the table and say what they did in 5 words or less. And mine was, I ask why a lot.
That's good.
Why did you do that? Why are we doing this? Why did this happen? That's my favorite word. Why?
You have to ask a lot of questions.
Absolutely.
I always liken what we do to being detectives, because we need to be inquisitive. We need to be uncovering things and asking questions. The difference is we're not trying to find someone who's killed someone or find a lost bicycle or something, but We're trying to do it with an end in sight. So the more information we gather, the better. But if you like, and it's kind of a detective without powers of arrest, maybe you could do that.
Oh,
I mean, we're not looking for who killed someone, but we are looking for maybe who killed a function.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I
Like
like
it could be
that.
likened.
That's good.
I have a background in science, so I see it all as an experiment. Constant testing is an experiment. And so there is a null hypothesis that the product is 100% bug-free. So I'm assuming that, and I know for a fact it isn't. So therefore, I am trying to get as close to that 100% bug-free as possible. And everything, all the testing I do is a sort of a series of small experiments in order to give more confidence that I'm reaching that goal.
I like that idea of experimentation. I have always fallen back on the idea that testers are not here to prove that the software is defect free, but we're also not here to prove that it's not. I'm just here to prove that it's good enough, which has really been hard for me because I'm a total perfectionist. And so drawing that line between like, what do we let go and say, we'll get to it later, versus what are we like, there's still problems. How do we fix it?
It's a very agile way of looking at things, though, right? Because, we want things to get better, but we also want things to be used and to get that feedback. And if you don't give it to anybody to use because you want it to be perfect before you give it to them, you could be really wide of the mark.
But you can strive for perfection. Being a perfectionist is brilliant because actually you can try your best to get to perfection. But as you say, Tara, you have to accept as a perfectionist that it won't be in other people's eyes, it will be just enough. And we have to accept that. We need to not argue our case because they've made the decision, but accept it. But do sort of say with caveats that this ABC has not been tested or whatever, and the expectation that there may be areas that we have less confidence in.
The advocacy side of it.
Yeah.
It's hard to do that, though, isn't it? If you are a perfectionist, you want to cover everything because you think that's my job. That's what I'm being paid to do. And I need to uncover all this information and give it to someone to make a decision. And I want the end users to actually like it. If you drop something that somebody uses and it makes them angry, then you've really failed. And if you could have done something to help with that, I think that's part of the job as well. Thinking about what's the person who's going to use this software actually going to feel like when they're using it. Because it might functionally work, but if they've got to do 5 clicks to do something they should do in one, then they might not be very happy with it.
I would also say that the criticality of bugs is an interesting thing, is the fact that you can have very severe and critical bugs that one single thing which will kill your product or whatever and stop it or work to actually rectify it. But also I think sometimes the number of minor bugs can build up into it, and sometimes that's forgotten. So actually highlighting the fact that there are 100 small bugs, and so actually the software is not really very intuitive or usable, that adds up to a critical bug in my mind, and that should be communicated as such.
There was a speaker at Eurostar a couple of years ago called Alex Baudin, and he is a test pilot and a tester, and he was saying that the way you present your findings as a tester is really important. But because he has the informed knowledge of what a pilot is looking for in a cockpit, he could have presented and said there are 45 buttons and knobs and lights that aren't working, and a business-facing person might have said, no, well, all these things to be sorted and stuff, but because they don't have the context of the user, that would be a bad business-facing person. There's lots of very good business-facing people out there, but his point was, actually, as a pilot, I probably only care about like 5 of those, and so if those 5 are working and I'm aware of them, then as a user, I'm more than fine knowing these things go wrong. I think, there's stats about airplanes having many things wrong with them at any given time, but the critical and important things that make it safe to fly, those are the things that are always maintained and kept working. And I think that was quite an interesting bit to sort of think about how we look at the criticality of bugs, like you said, David, because the impact of an issue that might be quite important to us because we're quite close and precious about some of the things we work on can be very different to that of the end user. And sometimes as testers, we can actually be quite far from the key assessor of quality, our customer. And so the things that we get really het up on might not actually be important. And so testing isn't always just about finding out information. It's also presenting that in a context that's correct. And so we might have to uncover an understanding of what does the end user need. And that might not be on us. That might be on the business, BAs, support folks or whatever, because this is a terrible thing. Maybe it isn't.
But that brings up a good point about testers having to be that quote unquote lifelong learners. I know I've picked up a lot of skills about things that I never would have picked up because I've had to test software for it. For example, I know a lot more than I ever wanted to about HVAC fans.
I think one of the other things is communication, making sure that you communicate things in the right way. And also communicate things early, as soon as you find them, because actually something that, again, I learned earlier in my career is that you can go sort of see this bug and you go, oh my God, this is critical. And you spend half a day investigating it. And then you go to them and go, I found this really important bug and I've drilled down into detail. And they go, oh no, that's not really being released until the next thing. We know about that. It's not
like you're speaking to my early career, Dave. I'm traumatized.
So make sure that you do communicate early on so that therefore it avoids that wasted effort. Yeah, communication, definitely.
There's a lot of skills that testers need then. We've got to communicate in different ways to different people, which is what you normally expect, like, say, a project manager to have to do. But no one actually sort of says to you that you need to do this when you start out in testing. Well, at least they didn't to me. So I kind of fell into the same traps that I would just assume everyone needed the same level of information, which then when it didn't work, I was sort of scratching my head going, how come? I just need to tell you this. That's my job, I'm telling you. But that wasn't at the level that they needed.
And it is communicating with people at different levels. I mean, the ChatGPT mentions about collaborating with developers, so that's on a sort of technical level, but then also providing feedback to stakeholders, which is a sort of much higher level and a different level of complexity, or exactly what you're doing. So you do have to gauge exactly what message you're giving and make it as sort of general as possible for your audience so that it's easily accessible to them.
Telling someone they got a critical defect with a smile.
Or explaining why they should care.
Yeah.
Right?
Pragmatism is important, and as is the context of why this thing that on paper looks like it's a class 3 issue, why this actually does matter, and why maybe this edge case is something we should care about rather than just dismiss. But that's language we can't use when we're talking about testing to people who aren't testers, like non-technical folk that don't know about those things. If we said edge cases and stakeholders, they might just think you're a little bit odd.
Gone into too much tech.
Yeah, you've definitely lost something, right? I do find through the course of my career, my soft skills have been far more important than the actual testing skills. Because I can test all day long, but if I can't explain to the boss what I found and why it should matter to them and the impact on the bottom line and all of those things, then it doesn't really matter to them. They're just like, all right, you did the thing we hired you to do. Yeah.
But it isn't just verbal communication, it's written communication. A few times end of the day, brain's a bit frazzled. I found a bug. I type what I consider to be the best bug report ever. And I go home and then I've shipped it off to the developer, and the developer then goes back and says, I'm not quite sure. And then you read it again and you think, this is utter rubbish. Because at the end of the day, you had all the context in your head, but you didn't manage to get it down on the piece of paper. And, okay, you had the steps there, but you didn't have quite enough detail or the right details. So again, it's giving you that headspace in order to really give the important information.
A lot of self-awareness needs to be had, and a little humility. I was thinking back to one of the points Tara was making there, which is the return on investment for testing. Have you ever noticed that people often look at testing as a bit of a cost rather than something that delivers value? Rather than saying, oh, we deliver quality, because we don't. How can we approach that conversation with people when it comes to sort of budget and other things without just spooking them and saying, well, if you don't do this, you'll release bugs into production?
So I used to build out my dashboards instead of saying, we have this many defects and we found and fixed this many. I like to put them through a quick calculation and say, this is how much money we've saved. Because that's way more impressive than saying, congratulations, you fixed 10 bugs this sprint. But if you saved this many hours at this price point, then all of a sudden somebody's kind of excited because, wow, that's a lot of money.
That's a really good way of doing it, especially if it's early on in the development or whatever. You can save a whole lot of money. You know, if you're comparing it to out in production, then actually, then stakeholders are going to be very happy with that, the savings that they've actually got.
Again, it's getting the message across to the person in a way that they'll best understand it. So if it's somebody who's got their finance hat on, then you've got to talk to them about money and where you've saved in the long run. Otherwise, they're not really going to be interested. So, but if it's someone who's actually kind of wanting to get a project out the door and it's got to be out by X date, then you can say, well, the value we're adding is making sure that we get it to a good standard to actually meet that date rather than shipping it and all the customers getting really cross. Yeah, it's just learning to tailor the right message, isn't it?
Yeah. And the other thing I found is making sure that you don't, in your messaging, feel like you're blaming people. If you're feeding back to developers because of a bug, it doesn't matter who wrote the code. So don't say you've put in this particular thing. Make sure it's based on the software that you're actually doing. You know, I've noticed this in the software, and then it takes out the personality and the blame. And so therefore people don't feel alienated by having worked on that particular product, or not measured by or judged by having put that particular bit of code in that caused that particular issue.
Yeah, I like to try to reinforce the idea of, you know, we're all coming at this with good intention. So if I have a bug or I have something that I think is, you know, not functioning as I thought it was intended, I always question myself, do I understand this correctly? Because you've spent 3 days coding this, so am I missing something? Did something change that I didn't know about? Rather than saying, well, this doesn't work.
The value of a sanity check is real, because you can sit there and go, have I understood this right? Like, I mean, and hopefully you've done like 3 Amigos and you kind of know what it's supposed to look like. But I think it's always good to come at that front, because that we all interpret things differently, and we all want whatever we're working on to succeed. So it's a communication thing. Once again, it's very, very interesting when you're trying to tell the story of a customer when you've got somebody who has a different idea of what's important to them, and to pull that sort of priority back, reduce the scope creep maybe. Because again, we talked about perfectionism and stuff, but have you ever noticed someone's like, oh, I could just do this, and you add some fun layers of complexity? Or
I'm right here, I'll just add this extra feature real quick, right?
It's like, hey, we got 4 hours left of the sprint, what are you doing?
I remember asking that exact question. I remember they were planning to do just a regression tests run because it was only a small amount of changes. I remember just close to the end of the meeting, I just said, so has anyone added anything else that I need to be aware of? And one developer said, oh, I just changed the syntax in one particular part of the code. And people were then sitting around the table scratching their head, well, that bit of code fits that bit, and suddenly the amount of testing that I had only to do the regression tests and half a day for suddenly exploded into at least 2 days of testing, which was not what they actually wanted, exactly as you said, Chris, at the end of the sprint, and they wanted to get out the door to the client.
It speaks to another thing, doesn't it, with quality of mind? It's the practices, it's the things that we do. It's an eye on the big picture rather than just the act of doing physical testing. It's testing the processes, the way that we work. It's thinking of the other people around us and having that sort of empathy and foresight and a bit of a holistic picture of everything that we're doing as well. And I think that's like another step up from the communication, because it's also an understanding of the bigger picture. And I think a lot of times testers are quite good at getting that bigger picture and sort of putting our head up out of our little silo and having a little look around and trying to understand all the dependencies. And if we don't, then we're going to break our necks trying to get a bit of an understanding.
I think another 2 features that testers have is being pedantic, but also trying not to make assumptions. Don't assume that just because you're told that,
or declaring those assumptions to make sure that those assumptions are correct.
Yes, absolutely. Making sure that you have all, going back to Tara's thing of asking questions, asking why are you doing that? Or what are you doing? Which is more important? All those questions. And I always want people to ask questions. I ask questions myself. No question in my mind is stupid, because if you have a question, it's something that's worrying you. And if it's worrying you, it's likely to have been worried other people. So definitely ask them. And if people turn their nose up or whatever, or dismiss you, ask it again. Ask it again. It's important. If any question is important to you, so actually they should give you the courtesy of answering it.
I think people get frightened to ask questions because they need to be told sometimes that they're actually in a safe space and it's okay. And we're saying, testers should ask loads of questions, but I'm sure all of us have had experiences where you've been that person and you've raised something and then somebody's made you feel that big. Oh, that was really stupid. And then you just don't want to ask again. Or somebody snaps at you because you've asked something and is like, oh, we're not doing that, doesn't matter. And it really puts you off from asking. And it's one of those things that takes just a moment to kind of put you down, but a long time to build up the confidence again. But often you're right. Something you've got the courage to raise something, and then everyone else sits there nodding because they wanted to ask it, but no, they didn't want to speak up. So I think courage is something that testers need to have as well. Courage to ask the awkward things and some things that might not be very popular.
But also to give bad news as well. There have been times when you have to tell them this you've got a major problem here.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
Or preemptively be the devil's advocate too, right? And say, like, are you sure this is the route you want to go? Because here's the problems that I could foresee. Like,
to the point where we touched on earlier, it's like we present information, but it's not like we present information and now we wash our hands of the problem. Hey guys, that's your problem. I just test and give you information. We're invested in this whole thing as well. I've found it difficult in some circles where we're just to present information, and if we deign to cast an eye into the future and talk about dependencies elsewhere and other problems that architectural decisions might unravel in front of us, that's going above and beyond, and I worry that some of us put ourselves in a box when I think we provide value by saying, oh, what about if that happened? I've seen these things happen before. This is quite a bad thing. Have we thought about this? Have we thought about that? Like risks. We talk about risks all the time. This is something that could go wrong. I can just foresee a big explosion. Please put my mind at rest.
So do you think we need to put into what we described to describing our job to non-testers? Do you think we should say we're a bit negative? We're always looking for what could go wrong, because it can seem that way, can't it? From what you were describing there, Chris, it's like, yeah, we're looking for risks. We're not always looking for the negatives, but I think a lot of the time we kind of are, but we shouldn't do it all the time. We should be looking for things that work well.
Risks are closely associated with quality, and quality is what we're all striving for. And risks are just that threat to the quality, and we want that good quality thing. So we're just aware of that thing that's going to stop us. It's the like Stu Crocker says, it's we're aiming for the removal of unnecessary friction. That's just we want everything to be smooth and wonderful. And I think because we want all that goodness, we have to be aware of the badness. This is why we check the best before end on our food before we get it out of the fridge and put it in on the plate. Like it's just sensible. I don't know many testers who are innately negative folks. Like we're all pretty upbeat and happy people. Sometimes we got to give the bad news. Sometimes we've got to look for the bad things. But I don't go to some software and go, watch this, I'm going to break your stuff and break your,
I thought everyone did that.
I mean,
it must just be me.
Sometimes. But I had a college professor that gave this beautiful analogy that really stuck with me. He said, it's not negative to carry around an umbrella. It's negative to be pissed off when you're caught in the rain. I just loved that.
That's
and
great.
It just stuck in my brain and it's lived there ever since.
That's amazing.
I need to use that sometime in the next few days. I need to find a scenario where I can just pull that one out and use it.
You do live somewhere where it gets a bit rainy, Steve, so that shouldn't be too hard.
There you go. You're welcome.
One thing I was going to say is that I can understand the sort of negative connotations because most of our sort of reporting is about those negative, those issues you found. However, at the end, when we finished our testing, it is sort of a celebration of what have we actually covered? What have we actually achieved? Most of our work is seen as negative because we're creating issues and trying to rectify things. But actually, the overall end point is a better quality product. And so actually, we should be really proud of what all that negativity, because actually the end goal is a good quality product that hopefully people will use.
It's something that you've got more certainty about. By testing and checking things out, you're actually gaining certainty. So that end level of certainty and confidence you have, rather than just working through and things just kind of work, we don't really know, and you have a sort of, here's the thing. So it's like when you ask for feedback, say if you've ever written an abstract for a conference and you've just submitted it without asking for feedback. That's a thing where you think, I like the idea, but I didn't check. And same with like if you wrote a paper at university or anything like that, if you don't get it proofread, you don't get that feedback, you think the core is good, but you don't have that certainty. And that positive like outcome of having the certainty because we checked it, because we had it reviewed, because we went through those pieces. I think the end goal is a positive thing. We just kind of fixate on the bugs and the negativity on the way sometimes.
Yeah, we should celebrate success.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think part of it comes back to that communication and storytelling layer, right? Do you say, all right, guys, the sprint was awful because we found X number of bugs, or do you say, look at how many bugs we presented and fixed?
You don't find many people that present that in a retro, though.
You.
Well, yeah, but then I've went to places where they've said a retro can't be fun as well, which is really sad.
That's true, and I think that's awful. It should be fun. Otherwise, everybody dreads going to them, and unless you bring donuts, nobody wants to go.
Yeah, that's really sad.
But retrospectives is for another time. We want to stick to what testers do, right?
So do we think we know what testers do to be able to explain to someone else? So if you were going down the road tomorrow, Chris, you walked into your local coffee shop like Costa or others are available, and you got chatting to the barista who was serving you a coffee, and they just said, so what is it that you do anyway? I'm going to put you on the spot and go, so what would you say?
Well, I'd say I test software, and then they'll look at me and they'll probably arc their head a little bit like a puppy. And I'll go, it depends on the context, my friend.
I was going to see what answer you gave.
We do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So I was going to turn that a different way. What one thing do you think, so we'll have 4 things here. So what one thing do you think is important for a tester?
I say uncovering information.
I would say communicating it to the people we're working with in the right way.
So being inquisitive. You have to have that kind of mindset. If you're not, then there'd be loads of things that you would miss.
Carol, the pressure's on you for the final one.
Yeah.
I know, it's like those are all so good. I really think that there's something to be said about really being the quality advocate. I think the most important thing I do is coach other people to look at things a different way or question their own assumptions. And in that respect, it gets more into the technical side of, did I look at this architecture correctly? Did I check all my edge cases? What happens if a user comes in and hits the enter key 50 times because they're irritated their internet's not working? All of those weird things that just make you go, did I think about that? I think that's the most important thing that I try to do.
I like that you said that. You just reminded me of a conversation I had with a product owner once, and we were looking at something where you could go and buy like a report and spend credit or something. And I said, so what if a user had 2 different tabs open at the same time and they had like a slow connection and they clicked one here and clicked one there? They might get away with one for free. And she looked at me and she said, why would they do that? And I said, because they can. It's just,
why wouldn't they do that?
Why wouldn't they? It's just, I got some really strange looks, but it's, yeah, I love that you mentioned that. Do you know what was interesting? No one said that coding was a key skill. Just dropping that one in.
All writing into manual test cases in a test management tool.
And with that bombshell, I think it's a fantastic opportunity to finish. So thank you so much for a brilliant discussion to both to Steve and Tara. Thank you. It was really interesting thing. I hope that our listeners have really taken something away and learned a little more about what testers do and what we do. Thank you again for Saffron QA. You can contact us with your own stories, your own definitions of what you consider testing to be. Tell us whether you think ChatGPT is correct in what they're actually saying. We'll include that definition in the show notes. Contact us through email at contact@testingpeers.com. You can look at us or follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Also, you can help support us on Patreon. Again, on all these places, look for Testing Peers. So thank you very much again for Steve and Tara, and we look forward to welcoming our listeners back soon.
For now, it's goodbye from the Testing Peers.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.